Hello everybody, welcome to Learn Medics. Today we are going to deal with cell injury. In this mojo, we are going to be deal with types of injury, cellular changes and mechanisms of injury. Cell injury is also known as cell damage. It occurs due to varieties of adaptive changes that occur in a cell. Broadly speaking, there are four causes of cell injury. First one is the capacity for adaptation exceeded. We talk about the detailed video of adaptation. As I mentioned that the cell has a certain limit to adapt to the stress. If the adaptation exceeded, the cell leads to injury and exposure to various injurious agents or toxic agents, and due to the deprived nutrients and a mutation disrupts the metabolism. The cell injury is reversible up to a point, but in severe or persistent injury, it may be irreversible and lead to cell death. Cell dies usually in two ways. First one is by the apoptosis way or the programmed way. Second one is necrosis or unprogrammed way. In the apoptosis, the individual cell kill itself in an orderly manner, and it is a non-inflammatory process and no process any damage to tissue bed or adjacent cells. Secondly, necrosis. Necrosis triggers inflammation by the cellular content leaking from the cell. The inflammation leads to more damage of cells and a group of cells or tissue bed. And as we all know that necrosis is preceded by lots of classic cellular changes. That is, first one, it goes with reversible changes and it leads to reversible changes. For example, in the case of myocardial cells, after infarction, the myocardial cells first undergo adaptation, leads to reversible cellular damage and leads to the irreversible cellular damage. Eventually, it die by necrosis. That is in the case of pancreatic cells in pancreatitis. Now we are going to discuss with the types of injury. Mainly there are two types of cell injury. One is reversible cell injury and the second one is irreversible cell injury. In the reversible cell injury, the dearranged function and morphology of the injured cells can return to normal if the damaging stimulus is removed. The damaging stimulus, when the damaged stimulus is removed, it can retain its normal function and morphology. But it is in contrast with irreversible cell injury. Irreversible changes occur in the cell and it never go back into normal. For example, in the case of myocardial cells after infarction. Reversible cell injury and the changes occur in a cell during the reversible injury. First one is the cellular swelling. It is the major feature of most forms of cell injury. It is due to the water accumulation in a cell. That is how the water is accumulated in a cell. It's due to the deprived activity or loss of activity of sodium, potassium, ATPase pumps, and leads to the accumulation of sodium and calcium in a cell, leads to the hydrophic change in the cell by the accumulation of water. It is difficult to observing in microscope. The second change is fatty change. It's seen only systems that heavily metabolize fatty acids. That is, for example, in the case of liver, heart, and skeletal muscle. Under microscope, we can see lipid vacuoles in cytoplasm. The third is mitochondrial swelling. The fourth cellular changes occur in reversible cell injury is the membrane blubbing. As you know that cytoskeleton, it's maintained the membrane structure. So, in the case of reversible cell injury, the cytoskeleton get damaged and leads to the bulging of cell membrane or blubs, occurring the blubbing of cell membrane. And the fifth one is the dilation of ER. We know that endoplasmic reticulum is responsible for the production of various protein. So during the dilation of ER, the protein synthesis go down and the ribosomes present in the ER detach or called polysome detachment. Now we are going to deal with the irreversible cell damage and the cellular changes or mechanism. The irreversible cell damage may lead to the necrosis. So first cellular changes is the membrane damage. Membrane damage means it's leak the contents from the cell. Lots of cell organelles leak out of the cell, leading to the inflammation and leads to the necrosis. So a lot of cell contents are leaking, so it can be used as a serum diagnostic for various disease. For example, in the case of myocardial infarction, we can take the troponin test, and in case of pancreatitis, the lipase found in the serum. These type of molecules that come out of from the cell activate the calcium dependent phospholipases, and it damage the cell further. The second one is the rupture of lysosomes. The lysosomes contain enzymes that degrade the cellular contents. So during the rupture of lysosomes, the enzymes that degrade cell contents leads to the irreversible cell injury. The third one is nuclear changes. In the nucleus, we have DNA. The DNA condenses so that the nucleus gets shrinked. The shrinked nucleus is known as pyokinesis, and the pyokinated nucleus get faded. It's due to the loss of basophilic or dark color by the chromatin dissolution by the action of RNAs and DNAs. This nuclear fading is called karyolysis, and the pycinated karyolysis nucleus get fragmented. Its nucleus undergo fragmentation. It is called karyorexis. So the three process occurs in nuclear changes is the pyokinesis by the nuclear shrinkage, karyolysis, nuclear fading, and karyorexis means nucleus undergo fragmentation. This is the picture we can represent all these things. The pyokinetic means nuclear is shrinked, and karyolysis nucleus is get faded, and the karyorexis means fragmentation. So we are going to discuss with the mechanisms of injury, how all these injury occur. First one is the ATP depletion. It's due to the deprived O2 supply leads to mitochondrial damage. There is some toxins that directly attack the cell. Thus also the ATP got depleted, and loss of membrane pumps, as I mentioned above, mentioned in few slides back, that is sodium and potassium pumps. Loss of membrane pumps and loss of protein synthesis due to the endoplasmic reticulum dilation also leads to the ATP depletion. And the second one is the calcium. In the normal cell, in the intracellular calcium is more compared with extracellular calcium. When a calcium influx into a cell happens, it is a hallmark of injury. It is hallmark of injury. From it is Even though if it is released from cellular storage, damage the mitochondria, it activate the calcium dependent phospholipases and break down the membrane lipids. Third one is the mitochondrial damage. It also, because of the lack of oxygen, also known as hypoxia. The reactive oxygen species, that is O2 free radicals, also responsible for the mitochondrial damage. The opening of transition pore, a hole in mitochondria opened by calcium, it loses the membrane potential and failure of oxidative phosphorylation. And the fourth one is free radicals. Radicals damage many cellular components. It damage membranes, damage enzymes, and disruption of DNA leads to cellular damage. That's all about the various kinds of cellular damage and mechanism of cellular damage and cellular changes in the damage occur. Thank you and have a nice day.